Live from the KUDZUKIAN studios in Memphis, Tennessee, this is Artivism with your host, Linda Steele.
Hey, welcome back to Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN network. I'm your host, Linda Steele, and in this episode, I'm going to be speaking with Sheree Renee Thomas, science fiction writer and editor. You're not going to want to miss this one because she is a 2-time World Fantasy Award winner and author of Dark Matter and Sleeping Under the Tree of Life. In this episode, you're going to hear Sheree's journey from Memphis to New York City, and she's going to talk about her experiences in publishing houses in New York, and she's going to give some very important tips on how to get into publishing and becoming a writer. Stay tuned for Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN network.
Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN network.
Grind fed.
I'm your host, Cynthia Daniels.
And I'm your co-host, Williams Brack.
So we're going to be interviewing business owners about their journey. What made them leave their 9-to-5 and just go out and create their own brand?
I think sometimes we overplan things and that can kind of cause a delay or setback. But I would definitely say dive in, get your name started, get your website up, get your business cards.
Grind fed.
Sponsored by Epicenter, powered by the KUDZUKIAN network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Google Play, and many of your podcast providers.
Grind fed.
Hey, I'm Sheree Renee Thomas, award-winning author of Dark Matter, a century of speculative fiction from the African diaspora, and you're listening to Artivism, powered by the KUDZUKIAN network.
Hey, welcome back to Artivism, and I'm your host, Linda Steele. And as I was saying, we have a fantastic guest today. Sheree, how are you doing?
I'm great today, Linda.
Great. Nice to hear. On Artivism, we speak to people who work at the intersection of art and social activism. And would you please tell everyone, what is your art? What is your work? How would you describe yourself?
My art is with words, mostly on the page. Though occasionally I can be convinced to go from the page to the stage. But I am a writer, fiction writer, occasional poet, occasional essayist as well. And I'm an editor. So I help other writers use the power of the word as well.
Oh, yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Now, I know everyone's curious, how did you get to this point? Because you're published, you travel globally, you speak to others, you coach others. So tell everyone, how did Sheree get to this point? What's the Sheree story?
I have to say it's the Thomas family's fault. It's North Memphis's fault. It's Klondike. I was born in a family, and probably like other Memphians too, who were really great storytellers. I just have to say it. They were wonderful storytellers. My grandparents, whether they were talking about their coming of age and how it was different, being from the country or whatever, outside of Memphis. My grandfather was from Fayette County. Would tell me things as a young girl that would be kind of shocking and surprising. He would sometimes tell me scary stories on the porch that I loved. My parents were both very big, strong readers. There were books all through our house. So I was just that old soul that, grabbed all the things that were in the book and read everything, whether I thought it was interesting or not. I just wanted to know, and they recognized that in me, that I love story. I was attentive, and that I wanted to tell stories as well. So first it was orally telling stories, and they would listen to me run my mouth, And then it became writing. My mother taught me to read very early. And so I was able to write. I didn't always have paper. So my grandfather would sometimes just give me the envelopes that his bills would come in or whatever. And I would write on the backs of that, write my own stories or poems or what have you. And I was just always working with stories. Never really thought that it was something I would do as a career, you know, because we're modest family, didn't come from a lot of means. And so the whole ideal is like if you were book smart, you know, you got that book sense, you know, not always having country sense, but having book sense, then you were going to be something practical. You're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or something that has social status and some type of financial stability. So that's the area that I was sort of being encouraged to be in. But they always let me tell my stories and write. So,
did you go to a school for performing arts or creative arts
in Memphis?
Yeah.
I watched Fame on television. Let's put that like that. No, I didn't. I went to regular Memphis City schools. God bless them. I had great teachers. And there, actually, one of the teachers I remember was I think my mother's teacher at some point. Mrs. Brown, up at now that it's the Katie Sexton Community Center. I would do things there, but that was more performing arts because you know how we are as a community. They want to entertain each other. They want to razzle dazzle. So, you know, you're either going to be a singer or you're going to be a dancer. So they had me in tap dancing classes. And anybody that knows me knows better than to have me in a tap dancing class. But she also recognized that I was pretty good in school. So she would encourage me, give me extra assignments and check on me and stuff. And actually came and, I would say, like, scooped me up one weekend so I could spend the weekend with her, and she was just showing me other stuff. I remember that. That was maybe third grade, you know, but I went to regular schools, and just whatever we had an opportunity to write, I would just show up and show out. I mean, I loved it, you know, I loved it.
Hey, I'm your host, Linda Steele, and you're listening to Artivism, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network, and my host today is Sheree Renee Thomas. We've just been talking with Sheree about how she got to be a writer, and so you were taking us through your classes and in high school. Did you take any special creative writing courses or anything like that?
In high school, I'm going to say again. I mean, this is the reality. Librarians, outside of my family, who were very, very supportive, always made sure I had books or a library card. Librarians were my lifeblood. I remember my one of them, Mrs. Blackwood at Cynic Hills Elementary, was really important to me. She made sure that she pointed out all the books that she knew I loved. She knew pretty early I liked science fiction, so I still remember some of the books that I first discovered in that young library. I went and ended up at Raleigh Egypt for a while, and then when my family separated, we were transferred to Sheffield, which is a bit of a culture shock for me, because I hadn't even heard of that high school before I went there. So in this big round building, so I was walking around lost and going in a circle around it. But again, I found myself with really great teachers. Mrs. Wooldridge was my French teacher in particular, was wonderful. I had a terrific history teacher, Mr. Thompson, which reminded me that there were stories in other genres besides just English classes. The whole ideal of historiography and how we tell the history of our country is absolute storytelling.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And who gets to tell that story and how they edit it and what they leave in and what they take out and the context of it and how they frame it for readers. It was very exciting to me. So, I took the AP classes and everything that I could take. I was part of, I think at the time we had a writing, I don't know if it was called the Writing Olympics or some kind of writing competitions that they had in the city schools. I did pretty well in that, but again, never really thinking, I'm going to be a writer one day, And we didn't have a school newspaper. And, no. We didn't. I ran track.
So it was
softball.
Really sheer talent and desire to keep writing, because it didn't seem like there was any in school, any kind of activities.
Not creatively, right. not creatively necessarily. I mean, you had assignments that you would do in English class. You had to write something that was like Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. I remember having to do that at some point, and I wrote my own versions of certain things as projects, But the main thing was about reading, and that's the thing that I find, like when I'm talking to aspiring writers and young writers, they don't always recognize that the main thing that you can do as a writer, besides observe and listen and be a part of life, is to read. You must read a tremendous amount of work. And you have to read outside of your interests as well, And so I was always reading, and that's the lifeblood of a writer, being immersed in literature, immersed in nonfiction, doing your research, being out there in terms of the text and the world. So,
that's so important. You are listening to Artivism, and I'm your host, Linda Steele, and I'm having a fascinating conversation with Sheree Renee Thomas about writing and reading, and we're going to continue this conversation. You've been listening to Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network. I'm your host, Linda Steele, and I've been talking to Sheree Renee Thomas.
Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network. KUDZUKIAN!
You're listening to Artivism. Artivism features conversations with artists, creatives, and citizens working at the intersection of art and social activism. And I'm Linda Steele, your host. I'm a grant maker, change maker, social venture capitalist, and I invest in individuals and projects that use the arts as a vehicle for social change.
Keeping it real, right, and funky.
Mauricio Caldwell, who happens to be the executive director of Latino Memphis. Welcome to Funky Politics, sir. How are you?
Great. Thank you. You're having as much trouble saying my name as I do saying KUDZUKIAN, so we're even.
Hey, look, I'm good on that.
Reasonable people understand that a country is more than its leader. I mean, I love my home country, but I think people in Memphis need to count their blessings.
Funky Politics on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
KUDZUKIAN! Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Hi, welcome back to Artivism, and I'm your host, Linda Steele, and I'm talking to the fascinating Sheree Renee Thomas. Sheree, so tell us a little bit more about some of the challenges that you faced in becoming a writer and an editor professionally.
One of the challenges I had was, like I said, when my family broke up, my parents divorced. It was pretty traumatic for my brothers and I, and for my mother, of course, who was picking up all the slack at that point, taking care of all three of us. So when I transferred to the new high school, I was lost in a number of ways. I mean, I was just coming into adolescence. I had lost all of my old friends in my own neighborhood. I didn't see one half of my family very often anymore, so that really changed our relationships because I didn't get to see them. And I had to start all over again when I was just getting in my groove, just coming into my own. So for me, retreating into the world of books, and storytelling and writing was an old comfort zone for me. It was a place that I knew from very well, and it was familiar to me. And I think I was just very vulnerable at the time. So a few things happened to me that were, pretty traumatic. And out of that experience, I became a statistic in the high school that I was in. I was a teen mother.
Wow.
And but I was a valedictorian.
Wow.
So, this is Sheree, always on some other stuff. Feast
teen
or famine,
mom and valedictorian.
Comedy and tragedy, all at once, So, of course, this is in the 90s. I mean, we're late 80s, early 90s. So the whole conversation was, girl, your life is over. You had all that book sense, none of that good sense, and
Sheree, poor Sheree. Did you hear about Sheree?
But I'm a Thomas, and we always rise above, So there was no way in the world I was going to lose everything that I had been working for anyway.
Right.
So I just kept it moving, worked even harder. I had terrific guidance counselors. Mrs. Ruby Rollins was particularly important to me. Kept me focused, kept me on what I was doing. And so I had my oldest daughter my senior year in high school, and graduated with more scholarships than anyone had ever had in the history of the school. Of course. I could have told them already I was going to roll. And basically at the graduation, when I gave my speech, my daughter's cousin was a salutatorian, which is kind of ironic. I always said she set me up when she introduced me to my daughter's father. But, we basically had her up in the audience like the Lion King, you know?
Yes.
I was ready to go. I had made a difficult decision that I was going to decline all the other acceptances that I had gotten to my dream colleges. Because my life can change completely when I became a young mother, obviously. And so I chose to stay home in Memphis, where I thought I would have more of a family, extended family network and support. And I went to Rhodes in there thinking I was going to be, I don't know, science major. What possessed me to think that? Because I did love science. I really did. But no, the science lab was not for me.
What did you major in?
I ended up majoring in history.
Oh, really?
History. Again, I'm going back to that wonderful, background I had with my elders, who were always, reminding us how far we had come in the city in terms of the Black community, what the challenges were like. My grandfather would take me over on Cleveland, I guess where the Woolworths used to be. And we would, when it was still there, he would take us there to get floats and things. But I didn't know at the time that was a place that we had been denied, like it was segregated. So he had so much pride taking us to these places, and then later he would tell us why he took us there. That history, had a lot of history in our church. That I think was like maybe the first Black bus driver or something like that. And these are things that you don't really think about on an everyday basis, but that history was important. So when I had a great history teacher in high school, and I decided I was not going to be a chemistry major. That lab killed me. I realized that I didn't want to really revisit the same stories we've been reading in high school and stuff. And mind you, I've been reading a long time widely. I wanted different stories, and so history was very exciting to me. An opportunity to go deep into the America's founding and the South and what it meant to be part of the global community. That was important. So I took a lot of history classes, anthropology classes, whatever. I had one English class that I took with a professor. I think she's retired now, Professor Brady. And we had to write an essay of some sort. And we'd been reading Joan Didion and some other great work that really had a strong impact on me. And I think the Civil Rights Museum was just starting out. It was just creating it. And I remember walking out there, I believe I was a student representative at the time, at the Civil Rights Museum, and I saw Miss Jackie, the protester, out there. She was, didn't know she would still be there years later.
Today.
But I
you
spoke with her.
You can see her today.
Yeah, you can still see her and hear her. But I spoke with her then and talked with her and just listened. And I was just struck by her commitment to trying to be a visual protest for what she felt like Dr. King's actual vision would be more active and proactive than just a museum. She felt like it wasn't dynamic enough in terms of his Poor People's Campaign and what he really wanted to see happening in the world and what he actually was, murdered for. And so I went back and it just stayed in my mind, and I ended up writing this essay and turning it in. And Professor Brady was like, why aren't you in the English department? You should be writing. You should be publishing. And so she encouraged me to, write for the school paper at the time, the Southwester, and, just keep exploring my writing. So,
wow. You are listening to Artivism, and I'm your host, Linda Steele, and I am having a very, very compelling conversation with Sheree Renee Thomas about her journey as a writer. Sheree, tell us a little bit more about how you completed Rhodes. You were in history. Did you fit? It sounds like something I need to tune in every week. Did you stay with history, or did you finish as an English
got on
major?
Out of there. I had to get out of there. I got on out of there. One thing. the agreement when I was recruited was completely different than what it was when I got there. Mind you, I was a non-traditional student. At the time, it seemed like I was the only student on the campus who had a child or hadn't aborted her child or whatever. I actually had my child on campus, let's just be real. And it was just strange experiences. Like I would have, I found out eventually that one of the administrators had been sending students informally to come and talk with me about my experience being a young mother on campus without my permission. You know, it was just some odd things. They didn't have traditional housing for me, and I had been promised that. It was just hard. So I ended up working like 3 or 4 jobs while I'm at Rhodes. So it was very, very difficult. And the extended family support that I thought I was going to have fell apart. So I was working at Gallery 350 on South Main Street. You know how things come full circle with Mrs. Burke, and it's a wonderful space. Visual art. She had a bookstore as well. All these great people would come in from out of town and would talk about their art, their craft, their what have you. It was just a great space to sit there and plan. And one day, a friend of mine who also worked there, wonderful writer Jamie Hatley, Memphian as well, walked in with a magazine, Black Enterprise. And on the cover there were these women who were publishers. And it never occurred to me publishing as a career, and particularly us in these roles. They had created One World Books, which was the first multicultural imprint in the country at Random House. And they were on the cover, Cheryl Woodruff, Marie Dunn Brown, who later became my own literary agent. Cheryl Woodruff was my first publishing mentor. All these wonderful women, Christine Mills Noble, who was the art director, all of them are on the cover. And I thought, thank you.
This is it.
The seed was planted. If I want to be a writer, and I don't anticipate, you always dream you're going to be a New York Times bestseller or an award winner, and awards don't always come with money. Let me remind you all of this. They don't always come with money. But you need to be in the world of writing. That's what I was thinking. So I'm like, well, I'm going to have to work a day job anyway. At least let it be in a field where I'm learning what it means to publish a book. What's that process? It takes 9 months to become a book. What are all the different departments that are involved in taking a writer's ideal that they've labored over and put into a manuscript, taking that manuscript and taking it through the editorial process, and then making it into an actual book and marketing it and getting it into the hands of readers? Like, what's that process? If you're going to do that, you got to go to New York City.
Yes.
So I packed my baby.
And you went to New York
City. And I got
down. Hey, where else can you hear this fantastic story of Memphis to having a baby at 18, to history major, to South Main Gallery, to discovering publishing, and then on to New York? Nowhere but Artivism. You're listening to Artivism, and I'm your host, Linda Steele, on the KUDZUKIAN Network. We'll be right back with my guest, Sheree Renee Thomas.
Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Best in Blue.
That means we go to the schools, we go to the churches, we do all types of programs to try to build the relationship between law enforcement and the community.
Best in Blue on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
KUDZUKIAN.
Artivism.
Artivism. Artivism. Artivism. Artivism. Artivism.
Hey, I'm Linda Steele, and I'm your host of Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network, and I'm having a wonderful conversation with writer and editor Sheree Renee Thomas. And when we just wrapped up, we were just talking about how Sheree had just packed up her bags and her baby, and she headed to New York City. So we want to know what happened in New York City, and how did that contribute to who you are today, Sheree?
Oh, my world changed. In New York City. Mind you that my friends and I joke about it. It's like the mahogany story. Like, because the minute I'd said that I was going to move to New York to work, in publishing, of course, my local friends, Memphians, were like, "Oh, they're gonna mug you. You're taking a baby up there. You know, they're gonna rob you, child. You know, you're gonna be back in a year." I did not come back for almost 20 years. Okay, let's be real on that. But because I knew what I had, what I wanted to do. I had written a letter. To Cheryl Woodruff so that I could meet her. She told me she had 5 minutes to meet with me. Wow. I went on a spring break, and it was just everything was so amazing. She, of course, gave me more than 5 minutes. We ended up speaking for hours.
Wow.
When I left there, I had a promise of a job. Not a job, a promise of a job, because her assistant was going to get married. And that's the first time I heard of people quitting their jobs to plan their wedding. Okay. So that was just great for me. I met my first roommate that we ended up living in Strivers Row in Harlem because she liked the questions I was asking at the Schomburg Center for Research. There was Julianne Mavo, Cornell West, several others were there, and they had moderated questions from the audience. And my friend, the writer Rhonda Penrice, kept editing the questions. If she didn't like your question, she wouldn't send it up.
Exactly.
So we spoke after that, and she mentioned that she was looking for another roommate. I told her I was moving to New York,
So
and
really
we
the planets aligned.
All the planets aligned for this movement. When I tell you that, it's not an exaggeration. It was amazing. But I ended up working first as a floater. They had an editorial floater program where you could work in every imprint, and they had 33 imprints at Random House. It was over on 3rd Avenue at the time. And you could work in all those different imprints to see all the different departments, from editorial to production to the the art department, marketing, the audio books, everything, sales, all of that. And then you decide at the end of that period, that year, where you want to be. Well, I already knew I wanted to be in publishing, in the editorial part of it. I was hoping to be in the science fiction division, but they didn't have any spaces, so I ended up at Ballantine Books, and that's where I worked and learned how to edit with women editors, So if you're interested in publishing, definitely try to get yourself an internship or, an entry-level position so that you can work with the editors one-on-one.
So did you hear that? If you want to go into publishing, get yourself an internship or an entry-level position. Where else can you hear this kind of advice except on Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network? I'm your host, Linda Steele, and I'm having a conversation with Sheree Renee Thomas. Sheree, tell us, okay, you're there, you're working, internship. What was the moment when you were a writer? Let's fast forward. What was that moment?
I wrote it the whole time. I never stopped writing. I wrote on the train. I took the train to New York City with my daughter. My camp out space, I lived in, like I said, I lived in Harlem and Strivers Row, was the Schomburg Center. So I was down in the stacks in the archives, and that was the space right under the art. At the time, there was a Tom Fielding's exhibit, the Middle Passage exhibit was up, his work from his book, and I was there doing my research and writing. The seeds for dark matter were planted there.
There you go. Okay. So tell us about dark matter.
Dark matter is 2 volumes of Black science fiction. This is in, I thought about it in 1998, sold it to Warner Books in 1999. It was published in 2000 and hardcover 2001 and at a paperback, and it was the World Fantasy Award winner. And it was the first time a Black writer had ever won that award, even with Octavia Butler and Samuel Delany having published for decades.
Outstanding.
So, and it was the first time Warner Books had won that award.
Wow.
So it was amazing. I had to go to Montreal to go get it. Wasn't intending to go because I'm like, I'm not going to win. Why am I going to go to Montreal to go and lose? And then my editor, Betsy Mitchell, she was like, no, you need to go to Canada as soon as you can. Go. And so we went, and it was just amazing, life-changing. It kind of put on the map something that had been... People thought that we didn't read or write science fiction as a community. And it was very obvious out of my research and out of talking with all these other writers, some of them not even considered science fiction writers officially. They have been doing it for a long time. That, yes, we have a long tradition of that, going back into the 1890s, even connected back to Memphis.
So Black science fiction.
Yeah.
Did you hear that, readers? Black science fiction. Once again, I'm not, I was just so amazed to actually speak with Sheree. And where else can you hear more about Black science fiction? And that's Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network. I'm your host, Linda Steele, talking to the fascinating Sheree Renee Thomas. Sheree, why don't you read us an excerpt from one of your books?
I was going to read something short because the short fiction is long. The science fiction is long, so I'll read a short poem that's actually not science fiction, but it's a question that was being asked a lot. This poem is called Return Song, or Why I Went South.
Oh.
Because I wanted to be blind again, crawl through the call they call a veil and see again. Because I wanted to feel black, feel the darkness heavy and wet and good all around me. I wanted to be held like the night sky holds the comets pouring down the old bridge like rain. I wanted to feel the molecules of night dance on my skin like the flutter of wings, because I wanted to be where they know my naval names, how to make each syllable ring with sanctified country beats. Because I wanted to remember the things I was supposed to forget, to learn them as blood learns the way of sweet veins, as a river learns the sway of its own banks. Because I wanted to fall into the muddy waters to be cleansed again, unbury the string beneath the tree, to be born again, an old soul, alive and dark, bright with knowing. That's why I came back home.
Thank you, Sheree. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Our readers, our listeners would love to know about how to reach you, where to get your books, and where to find out more about you and what's up next for you.
Right. You can find me on social media occasionally at Black Pot Mojo, on Twitter, on Instagram, Sheree Renee Thomas. Although the only thing I really have on there right now, I think, are the photos when I went from the Cannes Film Festival. I'm on Facebook under my name, Sheree Renee Thomas, as well. I am heading to Berlin.
Yes.
To read my work. It's the 150th anniversary of W.E. Du Bois's The Comet, and we're doing a celebration. Of course, I was the one that introduced to the world that he actually wrote science fiction. So we're really excited about that. I'll be leaving there, going to the University of Rome. I just found out I will also be in Bilbao, Spain.
Okay.
And possibly in Birmingham, UK. So it's going to be my Europe tour.
Yes, yes. So when are you coming back the end of the year potentially?
No, well, I wish. I'll be back in November.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure, Sheree.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've been listening to Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network. I'm your host, Linda Steele, and I've been talking to Sheree Renee Thomas, writer, publisher, artivist.
Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Riffin' on jazz.
When two friends get together to kick it
about jazz, it's called Riffin' on Jazz.
Catch us riffing on jazz every week right here on your favorite broadcast or podcast platforms.
Riffin' on jazz on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
KUDZUKIAN!
Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Wasn't that an incredible conversation? I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I've been talking to Sheree Renee Thomas, science fiction writer and editor, and we talked about her incredible experience as a young teenage mother moving from Memphis to New York City, and then her experiences in the publishing houses of New York. And she gave tips on how to actually make it in publishing and writing. So you're going to want to hear this episode and listen a few times to get all of the tips that she gives us. You've been listening to Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network, and I'm your host, Linda Steele. You will find the Artivism podcast at the intersection of art and social activism. Artivism is executive produced by ArtUp, hosted by Linda Steele, produced, directed, and distributed by KUDZUKIAN.